The Trojan War is one of the most famous stories ever told. It gave the world Achilles, Hector, Helen, the Trojan Horse, the Iliad, and eventually the story of Odysseus. But the entire disaster supposedly began with something surprisingly small: a wedding invitation. The gods of Mount Olympus were celebrating the marriage of Peleus and Thetis. Almost every god was invited except Eris, the goddess of discord. Eris arrived anyway, carrying a golden apple with one message written on it: for the fairest. Three goddesses immediately wanted the apple. Hera wanted it, Athena wanted it, and Aphrodite wanted it. They asked Zeus to decide who was the most beautiful. Zeus wisely refused and sent them to a Trojan prince named Paris. Paris was living as a shepherd when the three goddesses appeared before him. Hera offered him power, Athena promised wisdom and victory, and Aphrodite offered him the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite. That woman was Helen, the queen of Sparta, and the wife of King Menelaus. Paris eventually traveled to Sparta and left with Helen. The ancient stories disagree about whether Helen went willingly or was taken, but either way, she ended up in Troy. Menelaus was furious and called on his powerful brother Agamemnon. Years earlier, the Greek kings who had competed for Helen's hand had sworn an oath to defend whoever married her. Now Agamemnon used that oath to gather the Greek kings and their armies. Their target was Troy. The Greek fleet gathered at Aulis, but the ships couldn't sail because the winds had stopped. According to the legend, Artemis demanded a terrible sacrifice from Agamemnon. He was told to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia. Some versions say she died, while others say Artemis rescued her at the last moment. Either way, the fleet finally received the winds it needed. But Agamemnon's decision created an enemy who would never forget it. His wife, Clytemnestra, would eventually take revenge. Before the Greeks could defeat Troy, they needed their greatest warrior. Achilles was the son of the mortal king Peleus and the sea goddess Thetis. His mother knew that Troy would bring him enormous fame, but also an early death. She tried to hide him on the island of Skyros. Achilles disguised himself among the king's daughters. But Odysseus discovered him by placing weapons among gifts and watching who reached for them. One person immediately grabbed a sword. Odysseus knew he had found Achilles. Achilles chose glory over a long and peaceful life. He joined the Greek army. The Greeks finally reached Troy and discovered why the city was so difficult to conquer. Its enormous walls protected the city, while King Priam and his sons commanded the Trojan forces. The greatest Trojan warrior was Hector, Priam's eldest son. For 9 years, the Greeks and Trojans fought without either side achieving a final victory. Then, during the 10th year, the war changed because of an argument between Agamemnon and Achilles. Agamemnon had taken a woman whose father was a priest of Apollo. When Agamemnon refused to return her, Apollo sent a plague through the Greek camp. Agamemnon eventually gave her back, but demanded Achilles' prize, Briseis, as compensation. Achilles was furious. He refused to fight for Agamemnon anymore. The greatest warrior in the Greek army simply sat in his tent and watched the Greeks suffer. Achilles even asked his mother to persuade Zeus to help the Trojans. Without Achilles, Hector and the Trojans pushed the Greeks all the way back toward their ships. Achilles' closest companion, Patroclus, couldn't stand watching anymore. He asked to wear Achilles' armor and enter the battle. The idea was to make the Trojans believe Achilles had returned. Achilles agreed, but warned Patroclus not to chase the Trojans all the way to Troy. Patroclus ignored the warning. He pushed the Trojans back toward their city until Hector confronted him. Hector killed Patroclus and took Achilles' armor. When Achilles heard the news, his anger disappeared and was replaced by grief and revenge. His mother brought him new armor forged by the god Hephaestus. Achilles returned to the battlefield with one goal: find Hector. The two warriors eventually faced each other outside Troy. Hector tried to escape, but Achilles chased him around the city walls. Eventually, Hector turned to fight. Achilles killed him. Then he tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it behind him. But the gods protected Hector's body from being destroyed. For days, Achilles refused to let go of his anger. Then King Priam secretly entered the Greek camp. Priam was the father of Hector and the king of Troy. He walked into Achilles' tent and begged for his son's body. He asked Achilles to remember his own father. Achilles broke down. He understood the pain of losing a son and finally returned Hector's body. The Iliad ends with Hector's funeral. It does not actually tell the complete story of how Troy falls. That part comes from later traditions about the Trojan War. After Hector's death, Achilles continued fighting. He killed several important Trojan allies, but eventually, Paris shot him with an arrow guided by Apollo. Achilles died, and the Greeks lost their greatest warrior. The famous story that Achilles was specifically killed through his heel comes from later writers, not Homer's Iliad. After Achilles died, his armor became the prize. Ajax the Great believed it belonged to him, but the Greeks awarded it to Odysseus. Ajax was devastated and eventually lost his mind. In the legends, he attacked animals while believing they were the Greek leaders. When he realized what he had done, Ajax killed himself. But even after losing Achilles and Ajax, the Greeks still couldn't capture Troy. They needed another plan. Prophecies revealed that several things were necessary before the city could fall. The Greeks needed Heracles' famous bow, Achilles' son Neoptolemus, and a sacred image of Athena. Odysseus helped obtain them. Still, Troy's walls remained standing. So Odysseus came up with one final idea. A giant wooden horse would be built. Greek soldiers would hide inside it while the rest of the army sailed away. The Trojans would believe the Greeks had finally abandoned the war. The craftsman Epeius built the horse. The Greek fleet sailed away and hid nearby, leaving behind one man named Sinon. The Trojans captured Sinon and demanded to know why the Greeks had left the horse. Sinon claimed that the horse was a sacred offering to Athena. He told the Trojans that bringing it inside the city would protect Troy forever. But not everyone believed him. The Trojan priest Laocoon warned the city not to trust the Greeks. According to the legend, sea serpents suddenly appeared and killed Laocoon and his sons. The Trojans believed the gods had punished him. Then Cassandra, the daughter of Priam, warned everyone that the horse was a trap. Cassandra had the power to see the future, but Apollo had cursed her, so nobody would believe her. Her warning was ignored. The Trojans dragged the wooden horse through the gates of Troy. That night, the city celebrated. The war seemed to be over, but when Troy fell silent, the Greek soldiers climbed out of the horse. They opened the city gates. The Greek army returned from hiding, and Troy was destroyed. The city burned. King Priam was killed. The royal family was destroyed, and the surviving women and children were taken away as prisoners. The Trojan War had finally ended. But the Greeks soon discovered that winning the war was only the beginning of their suffering. The gods were angry about what had happened during the destruction of Troy. Storms scattered the Greek fleet, many ships were destroyed, and the surviving warriors began their long journeys home. Agamemnon eventually reached Mycenae, but Clytemnestra had never forgiven him for sacrificing Iphigenia. She and her lover killed Agamemnon soon after he returned. Menelaus and Helen eventually returned to Sparta after years of wandering, but one Greek hero had a much longer journey ahead, Odysseus. His journey home would take another 10 years. Along the way, he would encounter the Cyclops, Circe, the Sirens, Scylla, Charybdis, and the anger of the gods. That story became the Odyssey. The Trojan story also became part of Roman mythology. One Trojan prince, Aeneas, was said to have escaped the burning city while carrying his father. According to the Roman poet Virgil, Aeneas eventually reached Italy. His descendants would become connected to the founding of Rome. So the destruction of Troy became part of the origin story of one of history's greatest empires. But was Troy real? For centuries, many people believed the entire story was simply mythology. Then archaeologists began searching for the ancient city. In the 19th century, Heinrich Schliemann excavated a site at Hisarlik in modern Turkey. The site contained several layers of ancient settlements built on top of one another. One of those layers, known as Troy 7A, showed signs of destruction around the end of the Bronze Age. There was evidence of fire, damaged buildings, and objects suggesting that the city had experienced violence. Ancient Hittite records also mention a place called Wilusa. Some historians believe Wilusa may have been connected to the Greek name Ilios, one of the names used for Troy. The same records mention a powerful group called Ahiawa, which may be connected to the Achaeans of Greek tradition. None of this proves that Homer's story happened exactly as described. There probably wasn't a golden apple that literally caused the war. We can't prove that Achilles and Hector fought exactly as Homer described, and there is no archaeological proof of a giant wooden horse. But something happened around Troy during the late Bronze Age. A major city was destroyed. A powerful conflict may have taken place, and the memory of that conflict survived for centuries through oral storytelling. Eventually, those stories became the foundation for the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Trojan War became more than a story about Greeks and Trojans. It became a story about love, pride, revenge, loyalty, fate, and the terrible cost of war. Paris chose beauty over power. Menelaus demanded his wife back. Agamemnon sacrificed his own daughter. Achilles chose eternal glory even though he knew it would cost him his life. Hector stayed to defend a city he knew might fall. Priam entered the enemy camp to recover his dead son. And Odysseus discovered that sometimes the greatest weapon isn't strength, it's intelligence. The Iliad doesn't really tell us how Troy was destroyed. Instead, it shows us the human cost of the war. And the Odyssey continues the story by asking an even more interesting question. After 10 years of fighting, what happens when the heroes finally try to go home? Because for the Greeks who survived Troy, the war was over. But their journey was only beginning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through the Trojan War and the Iliad, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more stories from the ancient world. And tell us in the comments, which character from the Trojan War would you want to hear about next?